Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me. Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. My guest has just returned after 4 harrowing days in Manipur. He travelled widely in the state, he met a lot of people, and he saw for himself. And he's come back dejected, depressed, and very, very upset. Joining me now to explain that reaction and to share the experience he's been through is the director of the Centre for Equity Studies and the man who started the Karwan-e-Mohabbat campaign, Mander. Mander, as I said in that introduction, you've just returned after 4 harrowing days in Manipur. You call it a war zone. Why don't you start by spelling out exactly what you mean by war zone?
Karan, in many capacities, firstly as a civil servant, and then as a human rights worker, as a researcher, I've borne first-hand witness to India's communal, so the biggest incidents of communal violence, beginning with 84 in the 84 anti-Sikh violence and going on right through 2002, Kandhamal, Muzaffarnagar and so on. All of those were instances of grave communal strife and division. This is something else, and it's a mistake to imagine or to see or try to understand what's happening in Manipur from that lens. Two communities are torn apart. The state is highly partisan, but what they in their hands are not country-made, weapons and Molotov cocktails. They have the most sophisticated modern weaponry: the AK rifles, light machine guns, mortar, grenades, and these are being lobbed. It looks like a war zone. I mean, I could have been in Bosnia or I could have been in South Sudan or somewhere. It's different from anything that I have witnessed, except maybe in Kashmir. I won't, leaving out Kashmir, I've not seen anything like this.
In an interview that he gave us last week, Wilson Lalam Hangshing, the General Secretary of the Kuki People's Alliance, and a party with 2 MLAs in the Manipur Assembly, and which was an ally of Biren Singh till May,
Right.
said to me that frequently when the Meitei attack the Kukis, he was talking specifically about the Khaman Lok attack of 13-14 June, he says they come supported by the IRB, supported by the Manipur police, and with 2 and 4-inch mortars, as well as, and this astonished me, armored personnel carriers.
Yes.
Did you any of that?
Yeah, we were seeing all of this, we were hearing stories of this. And when we crossed what is like a border, it was really like going through an international border in a war zone. Among everything else, I mean, what you're saying, the Meiteis don't trust the Indian army. They believe that the Assam Rifles is completely aligned with the Kukis. The Kukis have no trust in the Manipur police and paramilitary. So even people in uniform are actually seen as part of the combatants.
Now, you say Manipur is literally divided between the Kuki and the Meitei as if there's a border between them.
Right.
You write, on both sides, entire villages have been razed to ashes. I can certainly know what that looks like when you see a picture in a magazine or you see it on a video screen. But in reality, when it's there in front of your eyes, what does it feel like?
In the camps, people spoke about this. I mean, this was the beginning of their long stories of grief. But imagine that you've lived together with people of the other community. And this is both where Meiteis are in a minority in Kuki-dominated areas in the mountains, and Kukis are in a minority in the valley. Suddenly, overnight, your neighbors come armed with modern weapons, huge mobs, and they have reduced. I mean, they burn your homes. Entire villages have been erased. I mean,
Literally every building in the village is erased.
It is erased. There's nothing left. It's all been reduced to ashes. And in a sense, this is like an extensive ethnic cleansing, mutual ethnic cleansing between the valley and the mountains.
As you spoke, what came to my mind? Pictures from Oppenheimer.
Right.
Images in Oppenheimer of the devastation created by the bombs that fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So a landscape where everything is demolished and burned. Yeah. That's what came to my mind. Is that unrealistic?
No. I mean, in a microcosms, in small microcosms. So it is, it's a very small state. Manipur is smaller than some of the districts I've been district collector of in terms of population. But yes, within those, you're seeing this kind of devastating warfare.
So there are patches of Manipur, Kuki or Meitei, where everything is demolished and flat.
Everything is demolished, and people have lost any kind of hope of ever returning.
You visited 7 different settlement camps on, as you put it, both sides of the border.
Right.
What were conditions like? How are people living there? Because they've been there in some cases for 90 days.
Yeah. The state was was entirely absent from the camps, from the Kuki camps. And slightly present in the Meitei camps in that they were at least in government buildings, stadiums and so on. The Kuki camps are largely in little church compounds because that is the only safe space they had. The conditions in both camps, but particularly in the Kuki camps, is close to humanitarian disaster already. And we saw children being reduced to eating watery rice with salt. There's no educational activities at all. We had 3 public health doctors in our Caravan team who had gone along, and they were saying that they were seeing clear signs of malnourishment are visible. Far from anyone offering psychosocial support, grief, people whose homes have been destroyed, who've seen the violence that they've seen. Somebody should be there to register their complaints. The state is completely absent, and I think for the entire country, because there's no realistic chance that this thing is going to be resolved in the next month or 2. People are probably going to be in these camps for months, and maybe a year or longer, and it's as if they've been just left to their own devices.
In statements that are being made in the Supreme Court by lawyers acting on behalf of either the central government or the state government, Tushar Mehta, the Secretary, Solicitor General in particular, seem to suggest that actually the conditions are quite good, that they're being looked after, that the government is making an effort to care for them. You're saying to me clearly that is simply not true.
That is absolutely not true. That's absolutely not true. So in the Kuki camps, where there's a much larger number of people, it is the church and an organization connected with the church. Many of us would have an imagination when you talk about the church of organizations with a lot of donations internationally. This is a small local church which has raised money actually mostly locally. I was trying to understand how they're getting the food. It's almost like the Sikh langar tradition. People are providing small amounts of grain on a day-to-day basis. It's the community looking after itself in very, very dire circumstances.
So if the church had not stepped in
Yeah.
to help in the Kuki settlement camps, these people would be completely bereft.
They are almost completely bereft already. It's really the church which is holding their hand, holding them through, preventing them from completely drowning.
So the state has literally, either through incompetence or through prejudice, turned its back on the Kukis because it should have been in a position to provide them at least food and some sort of protection, but it's incapable or unwilling to do so.
Karan, I was an IAS officer, and one of the most elementary things that you're trained in is how to respond to a calamity, a natural calamity or a human-made calamity of this kind. Governments know, I mean, you find large government buildings, how you provision it. It should have been, government officials, the entire state machinery should have been present there. Schools are not functioning. The teachers should have been deployed there, for instance. Anganwadi workers could have been there. Doctors should have been present. Food supplies, many other things, and we can talk about what the state should have done.
But none of that is happening.
None of that is happening. And it outraged me to
What
see.
in your mind is the explanation? Incompetence and inability, or is it rank prejudice? Because I imagine many of the officials are Meitei, and the people we're talking about at the moment are Kuki.
I think it's substantially prejudice in a kind of warlike situation in which the state is seen as partisan. But it is also, I think that, having been a civil servant myself, there is also the culpability of the civil service, because they should have asserted themselves and done what they must do, what the Constitution imagined that they would.
They failed to do their duty.
Yeah.
I mean, from what you're saying, in Kuki areas, the state has literally withered away, even if that's not what Marx had in mind.
Yes, it is. It's a state that has withered away and left people to their own devices. But even in the Meitei camps, there it isn't prejudice, but it is incompetence.
So even in Meitei camps,
Yes.
which is so much closer to Imphal,
Yeah.
within reach of them, the state incompetence has led to the state being unable to help.
Yeah.
How much worse are the Kuki camps compared to the Meitei camps?
Significantly worse in terms of provisioning, but the church has a sense of service, and I think that that is what is giving them a certain human character.
Are there equivalent civil society organizations helping the Meiteis in the Meitei camps? Arambai Tengol or Meitei Lipon?
I don't think the militant groups are helping them, but the Meitei civil society is strong. So people are reaching out to their respective communities, and that is as it should be. But the state should be in leadership, taking the help of civil society organizations. It cannot abandon its duty and leave it to civil society organizations in a time of, especially in a time of such great crisis.
So whether we're talking about the Kuki camps or the Meitei camps, essentially the two communities are looking after themselves. The state has completely disappeared.
Yeah. The state is a little bit present in the Meitei camps in terms of government buildings and so on. So,
tell me, what is the mood and what are the emotions of the people in these camps? They've been there almost for 90 days.
I would, I will recall them, and my colleagues as well. We would come back with a sense of we're carrying in our hearts there's sights of deep sorrow, firstly, and a kind of settled anger about what has happened to them. And most of all, I think the mood that we saw was of no hope that things are going to get better in the near future.
People have given up hope.
There's nothing that can give them hope in these circumstances. There is no way that people who've committed rapes and burnt their homes, are people who stormed the armories. Most of them are not even, haven't even been touched. Where is the government is not there to help you as your, while all of this is happening, babies are being born, little infants are, at that stage. All of that is happening. Old people, we saw, somebody had to carry a completely paralyzed family member across the mountains after your house is burned, and she was lying there. Nobody is there to take care of her. This is not, I mean, this is not the government that the Constitution imagined we would have.
I get the feeling from what you're saying that the dominant emotion in these camps, whether we're talking of Kuki or Meitei, is one of hopelessness. People have lost belief in a future.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's this amalgam which is even more tragic of deep grief, sort of deep anger, and a sense that it's not going to get better.
Grief, anger, and a sense it won't get better.
Right.
That sounds like a desperate situation for human beings to be in.
It is a desperate situation, and the people of the rest of India need to recognize this. I don't think we are still understanding how grave is the humanitarian crisis and the constitutional crisis of Manipur.
The one thing we haven't seen on our television screens, the one thing I don't think we've read in our newspapers, is an account of the situation in the camps. You brought it home vividly.
Right. And I think that's where we'll have to begin. And, the wounds are so deep. Where do we begin? I think it is begin by a sense of care, mutual care.
But you do say, and I think this is quite important, one sign of hope, of peace and healing is that you heard stories from both communities about how the other community had helped them. Give me an example of some of those stories, because that is about the only sign of hope in this otherwise desperate situation.
In fact, that's a task that I've set myself. I mean, we've got recordings of all of the, very long interviews. I'm alert. It's probably something that I need to find amidst all the hate and violence. I'm alert to accounts, and everywhere we heard accounts of, Kuki people would say it was finally these two Meitei people who hid us and took us away, or Meitei people would in those areas would talk about people who saved lives. I don't know. There's so many stories. I'll tell you one, just one, very briefly. There was a Meitei man who, a Kuki man who, in the Imphal area, young man who was working at a petrol pump. And there were 3 Kukis, and they didn't realize as the day passed, the evening when darkness fell, a mob came and said, we're searching for the Kukis. And these three Kuki men were attacked. One of them was killed, one managed to just about escape, and he had become completely unconscious, this third man. It's a bit of like a biblical story actually, because they took him for dead. He was being transferred to the mortuary. A mainland Indian doctor, just as a precaution, felt his pulse and found some heartbeat. Immediately he was rushed, and this is in the Imphal area. He said the doctors were wonderful. They took care of him for many days, and he was saved. It was almost like a coming back into life. And then when he was being transported, he was describing, it was again, he said that one of the Meitei men, uniformed men who was with him was taunting him and showing him bullets and saying, this is what your fate should be. Whereas the other Meitei man in the same van was encouraging him, helping him. So he has memories of both. And so on. The story is a long one. But throughout, there are good people everywhere.
The other interesting thing in your story is that doctors in Imphal, and I imagine, although the one you refer to is from mainland India, but the majority of doctors in Imphal will be Meitei doctors, and they have been willingly and reassuringly helping and healing those Kukis who've come there.
So that's the story I heard. And this boy goes on, and it's a story I'm planning to write. Where in the end I asked him, so when he got well and so on, I said, what do you feel? So he said, initially I felt very angry, and I wanted to go out and kill in revenge. But as I've thought about it with time, I have forgiven them, and I'm continuing my life.
This is the impact of those Meitei who cared for him, including the doctors.
That is the only foundation that I can find, not in our leaders, but in ordinary people.
We heard a very similar story on Saturday from 2 Kuki girls who were badly attacked in Imphal. One of them was left for dead. She was taken to hospital, and a Dr. Gojan, a Meitei neurologist, did a brain surgery and saved her life.
Right, absolutely.
So even in these desperate situations, there are good people from the other community, like Dr. Gojan, who've been helping.
Absolutely. And I think that compared to Nazi Germany, I think we've still, in all of these times of hate, we have substantial reservoirs of people of goodness. And that is where we'll
So
find.
at the brink, there is still no real danger of toppling over. We can still go back.
We're in grave danger of toppling over. If there's hope, it is because of these reservoirs of goodness.
Let me ask you a different, opposite question. You've also spoken to the Kukis in the hills, where now there are no Meitei at all. You've spoken to the Meitei in the valley, where there are no Kuki at all. How do these people who've completely separated, there's a demographic and geographical division between them, how do they view each other?
That was very frightening, was that we spoke to a whole range of people. So people who were directly affected in the relief camps, we talked to community leaders, we talked to church leaders, we talked to the mothers of Mira Pahibis in the valley, and so on. We talked to pastors. I found that the narrative was completely, the same on each side and completely irreconcilable. So let me say what they say without judgment about who is right and wrong. The Meiteis believe that the Kukis are basically foreign infiltrators, the kind of thing that you hear in Assam a great deal. So they're infiltrators, they don't even belong. Yeah, they cultivate poppy, and because of that, there's brown sugar, and Meitei youth are being destroyed because of the drug trade, drug cultivation. They occupying the reserved forest, so they're destroying our ecology, and so on. So there's this kind of construction, and therefore they're really bad news, and we can't live with them any longer. The Kukis say these are absolute lies. Yes, some of our people are, because they're poor, they're cultivating poppy, but who is processing the poppy? Who is engaging in this trade? Those are senior important people, and they name the highest people in highest office in Imphal and even in Delhi. So that's one part. They say that forests, of course, we engage in jhum cultivation, which is shifting cultivation. We've lived with the forest. We are not destroying the forest. We are Indians as much as anybody else. And the Meiteis, we believe, that is what the Kukis say, actually want to get ST status, because then they are allowed to come into the mountains, buy up our lands, reduce us to a minority, and take up our jobs. So these are, and so for both the constructions, as if this is a battle for survival of their community, a final battle for survival. And there's no meeting ground.
In this context, let me ask you a question about something the Solicitor General said in the Supreme Court yesterday. He claimed that virtually all the bodies in morgues in Imphal are illegal immigrants.
I read that, and it made my blood really boil. Think that there are 100 odd corpses in Imphal. The Kukis, it's impossible for them to cross the so-called border to come and claim the bodies of their families.
For fear of being killed.
For fear of being killed. That is why the bodies are still there. Not because there's no one to claim them. And to make a remark like that, I think is so insensitive from a top legal officer.
In fact, I want to put it on record, the two Kuki survivors that we interviewed on Saturday, Kim and Nancy, their mother-in-law and brother in one case, or mother-in-law and husband in the other, are actually in those morgues.
Yes.
Her father's in Churachandpur and can't even get the bodies. He doesn't want to leave Churachandpur until the funeral rites are finished, but they don't have access to the bodies, and the state's made no effort to identify, leave aside, hand over bodies. So and yet the Solicitor General glibly claims, without any evidence to support him, that they're all illegal immigrants.
And in fact, those bodies, when you're talking about the war zone, I was, in fact, that also was a thought that came to my mind. That you're having 100 bodies in a mortuary that no one can even claim because they're terrified to cross over.
Tell me, You must have also spoken to people, both Kuki and Meitei, about how they view their state government and also how they view the central government. What was their opinion of both?
See, the Kukis, of course, feel completely, not just abandoned. They believe that the chief, rightly or wrongly, that the chief minister is almost like the sort of the sponsor and icon, in a sense, of the Meitei militants and the battle. They have no faith in him at all, and his government. The Meiteis, I found, didn't have the same kind of complaint. There was sometimes a sense that, for instance, in the relief camps, the government could have done more. But they haven't abandoned faith. And that's part of the problem, that the two communities see the same administration in a very different way. About Mr. Modi, I noted, and many of the Kuki people actually say they believe that if there's president's rule, he will do better. That was something that I am not convinced by, but I am reporting what I heard. That they also, the Kukis want president's rule because they believe the central government will do, at least at this stage, they believe that it cannot be as bad as what.
Is the demand for president's rule by the Kukis an indication of faith in Modi and the central government, or is it actually a desire to get rid of Biren Singh?
No, it's a desire to get rid of Biren Singh. And I think this formulation some of them say it with a somewhat sardonic smile, but that's the only choice they have.
There's a lot of concern in mainland India, and no doubt internationally as well, about the fact that for 90 days the Prime Minister hasn't said a word about Manipur except for one brief statement, which I think lasted somewhere around 40-45 seconds. Is that a matter of concern amongst the Meitei and the Kuki that you met in Manipur?
I didn't hear anyone mention that. I think that when things are so bad, they have to hold on to some element of hope. So I did, as I said, hear an expectation that he would be a better option than the chief minister. But for the rest of us, of course, I think it's outrageous. It is that the Prime Minister has not expressed sympathy, solidarity. He should have gone to the very camps that I visited, for instance. He should have had the same, shared people's grief and
but it's interesting that an issue that is a major concern outside Manipur hasn't got the same echo within Manipur.
Yeah, I think that choices are so limited. I mean, I analyzed this a lot, but I did feel that if you have to choose between Biren Singh and the central government, they don't have a third choice. They would opt for the central government.
Now, the videos we've seen, not just of that horrific rape, but many other videos of the beheaded head of Davis Icke on a bamboo pole, or other accounts that we've read in papers of girls at the car wash, or women who've had their bodies burnt while they were locked inside their house. These have shaken the country. When you were in Manipur, did you get a sense that this is just the tip of the iceberg, that there's a lot more that we will eventually find out about and which will deeply distress and shake us, or is that just speculation?
I have no doubt that the story is even much more somber than has emerged. I would say, put a very quick caveat, because there are a lot of also horrible fake videos that are also making...
Absolutely. One from Burma that is being passed off as if it was a Kuki girl being killed by the Meitei.
Yeah. So I think that, we need the state to investigate fairly and tell us what really happened. And I think if we could rely on a state that would do fair justice, the story is very gruesome, which will emerge, even much more so than what we have heard.
So there are more things that will come out which will really shake us.
I have no doubt about that.
What we so far know is the tip of the iceberg.
Is the tip of the iceberg.
Looking back on the people you met, And you would have a better sense of this because not only have you been in their midst, not only are you an accomplished social activist who's worked in this field, but you're also a former civil servant who understands.
Right.
Can the Meitei and the Kuki live together again? Or do you think, sadly, a separate administration is the logical, rational answer?
See, a separate administration, I believe, cannot be an answer in a land, both Manipur and India, where there is so much diversity. Where are we going to keep finding, safety in samenesses as we define? Going back just a little into our own history, Pakistan is the best example because the idea of Pakistan was that we are safe only in our samenesses. And it took just a decade and a half to say, yes, I'm Muslim, but I'm also Bengali. I love my culture. And that's not good enough to bind us.
So and there's Baluchistan waiting in the wings.
And there's also, and the Muhajirs and so on. So I think that the search in Manipur or anywhere in the world that we can only live together with samenesses is a futile search. There are Nagas there. There are mainland Indians there. Now, where are we? It's a very peculiar situation that the community at this moment, which is safest in Manipur, is the Muslim Meitei, the Pangals. So but they are there as well, and there's a history of violence against them. In fact, the last time I went to Manipur was because of a lynching of a Pangal, very much like in mainland India. So I think that separate administrations is not, however much people at this moment have lost faith, I'm not sure is ever going to, because there'll be other people, minorities within, you're not going to have a total partition. I'll be looking at partitions of the kind that we saw in 47 and their futility. I think that we have to have a leadership which is completely lost, which talks about learning again, to trust again, to live together again.
But those voices aren't being heard at all.
At all. And I felt that a beginning, just a beginning, could be an acknowledgement of shared suffering. And what was remarkable when we sat in the camps was that sometimes you would feel that if I just closed my eyes and forgot about the identity, I wouldn't know whether I was in a Kuki camp listening to a person there or a Meitei camp, because when their homes and villages were burnt,
the story is the same.
The stories are the same. But the Meiteis would only remember how horrible was the violence of the Kukis, but not how the Kukis have also suffered the same, and vice versa for the others. I believe a good leadership would be one to first acknowledge my suffering and your suffering and see that they were the same. And maybe that's, the shared suffering and then shared belonging is where we have to go. There seems to me no other answer.
But it also follows from what you're saying,
right,
that if a separate administration is impractical, if not impossible, then the route back to being able to live together is long, tortuous, difficult, and it will take years.
It will, and we need a very different kind of leadership. We can't have a leadership which whose whole ideological sort of upbringing is on majoritarian dominance rather than on the respect of every minority.
Yeah, but that leadership isn't there, and who knows when it will come.
There is no other way, and that is why it's going to be a very long haul.
That is why also it looks so hopeless.
That's why it looks so hopeless. But I believe that there are reservoirs in society of goodness that will bring us together.
We're coming towards the end of this interview. Let me ask you two different questions.
Right.
You did a lot of work in Gujarat in 2002. You understand what happened there intimately. You now have a very good grasp and understanding of Manipur. Right. How does Manipur compare to Gujarat 21 years ago?
See, there are many similarities, but I would caution, seeing them as sort of mirrors of each other. The similarities is the role of the state, the majoritarian state, that actually even fostered and overheated the hatred that was already, latent and brimming. And that the state has allowed the violence to just continue and continue. It's important. I mean, no violence can continue like this for months unless the state wants it to. And that is similar and frighteningly similar. And the third is what we also talked about, the relief camps. Gujarat was actually the first instance that I saw, and I spoke a lot about it at that time, where the state actually abandoned people. There were about 1 lakh people in Ahmedabad itself who needed to be in relief camps. The state government said, let the community take care of itself. And this is a community which is completely being battered down. Where would they find places for 1 lakh people? Were largely in graveyards. It was really in graveyards that a large number of relief camps were going on. Between graves, people were sleeping. It was horrible, and the state had abandoned them. I saw exactly that, that. So those are the similarities. But as I said earlier, that is situations of extreme communal strife and pogroms. This is an incipient civil war, and one cannot equate the two.
Let me ask you one more question. There is a certain amount of concern that's emerging, largely because of contrasting statements made by, on the one hand, the Archbishop of Imphal, Dominic Lumon, and on the other hand, by the Archbishop of Bombay, Cardinal Oswald. Archbishop Lumon, the Archbishop of Imphal, has done a study in June and believes that there is a certain element, other than the Kukis and the Meiteis, who are responsible for the demolition of churches. And he says, I don't have proof, but he was pointing his finger at the Arambai Tengol and the Meitei Lipon. And he believes that there is a certain religious intolerance that is hiding behind the cover of ethnic conflict, and that there is a Hindu-Christian element there, but it's not the dominant element. Cardinal Oswald denied this effectively, although he's never been there and doesn't have personal knowledge. Because of the contrast between the two, this has become an issue of concern. So let me ask you, while you were there, did you sense a Hindu-Christian element behind the ethnic clash?
It's not behind it, it's intertwined.
Intertwined.
I think that the RSS has done a significant amount of work there. So the Meitei, some segments of the Meiteis also see themselves as Hindu supremacists and anti-Christian. But it would be very simplistic to say this was a Hindu-Christian battle. It wasn't. It was an old historic battle between these two communities. But this additional element of religious hate has also got intertwined, has further intertwined and further poisoned the climate.
So when you say that the RSS has been present and has been doing work, and I imagine it's mainly in the valley and the Imphal area, are there Hindutva elements involved?
That is what one hears. I mean, I think it's a matter that needs to be investigated. What exactly was the role of the RSS there? But and how critical was it? But my guess is, because these hostilities have been around for a long time, my hypothesis is that the introduction also of religious hatred into this very, very sort of troubled waters is maybe what actually tipped us over.
What Archbishop Lumon, the Archbishop of Imphal, categorically said to me yesterday, and he was quoting his own report of 15th June, is that the 249 Meitei churches destroyed in the valley were in fact not destroyed by the Kuki, because as he said, it happened in the first 36 hours. The Kukis were fleeing for their lives. There's no way they could have destroyed them. He believes other elements, and as I said, he was pointing the finger without directly blaming them at militants like Lipon and Tengol.
See the militants, again, I think it will be simplistic to think that militants are acting without public support. I mean, the problem is that you're seeing militants on both sides and you're seeing wide public support.
Both these groups are very closely connected to Biren Singh. I believe he's the patron of the Tengol, and Pramod Singh, the head of Meitei Lipon, has publicly said, I hero worship Biren Singh.
So, and political support. So I'm saying that it's simplistic to say that the militants were acting like, it's like the argument we hear in mainland India, oh, those are fringe elements which seem to be having high political patronage and strong social support.
This is why you believe the religious intolerance element has intertwined itself around the ethnic clash.
Absolutely.
My last question. On the basis of everything you've seen, and perhaps more importantly, on the experience you have as a civil servant who knows how the system needs to respond, what are the immediate tasks the government must undertake to at least restore some semblance of normalcy and decency to people's lives?
Karan, absolutely the first thing has to be dealing with the humanitarian crisis. Let civilians not suffer any more, more than is inevitable when you've lost everything.
This is tackling the tasks in the camps.
In the camps. So I think a massive presence, and these are small numbers for any a country of our size. Let the 50,000 odd people who are being displaced be taken care of in the best kind of way by central government, state government, and civil society, local and national. Let us all come together. I didn't see any international and national humanitarian agencies there either.
So it's all local civil society.
It's all local.
Mainland India has not responded.
Has not responded, and that is there, and that's that we can have another half-hour discussion about why I think that has happened. But I think all of us need to join hands and do a whole range of things and standard things. NREGA, special NREGA around each camp, guaranteeing everybody 150 days of work on just forest conservation work, etc., etc. That's elementary. Teachers and all schools are not functioning. Let each center have 2 or 3 teachers doing educational work. Let PDS rations be distributed. Also, there's some people who are not in the camps, living with families, etc. Let them get free PDS rations. Health care, clean water, psychosocial care. This we know what has to be done. Let there be belatedly extensive humanitarian support, I think, as one. Just the first 2 steps. And second is, there were 6,000 FIRs. I mean, it's appalling. The conversations in the court the past 2 days. Young lawyers, my own daughter was saying, she's a lawyer. She was saying, I just can't believe, you've had 3 months. You don't even have a proper classification of, these were the FIRs that have been received. What are those of rape? What are those of murder? What are those of this, that, and the other? Who are the people named? Arrest them. Make people aware that there is an administration on the ground which has some semblance of fairness.
Something that brings home the point you're making horrifically is that those 2 women who were dreadfully raped, by their own account,
Yes.
and also through their FIRs, have said that they were virtually handed over to the mob by the police. Yes. So clearly the police know who they handed them to, because they will recognize them. They can't have forgotten their faces. One of the girls has said that one of the people who molested her was a brother of her friend. He can be found, yet none of those people have been found, and the police didn't even take action.
And that's why, Karan, I said these 2 elementary first steps: humanitarian support, comprehensive,
and FIRs.
And arrests of people who are, who have been named in FIRs. Let the state begin to be present, show its presence. As a democratically elected government. It's not a government only of the Meitei people. It's also a government of the Kuki people.
So the bottom line is, the state, the entity we call India,
Yes.
needs to assert itself. At the moment, it's gone into hiding.
It's gone into hiding in a very malign kind of way, and I grieve for it destroys everything that we had imagined in the Constitution. That this is the kind of governments we will elect, and this is how they will protect our rights in difficult times.
Mander, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.